Hi, I am Jeff Tomborello. I am one of the directors of the Southwest Florida RIA, and I am joined by the other director of the Southwest Florida RIA, the Mike Lyons.
How's it going, Jeff?
How you doing, Mike?
What's up, man?
You spoke yesterday at the luncheon. We had a great turnout. Origami food's amazing. So it's
Yep.
a great meeting. Had lunch, had some knowledge, had some networking. Irony as I went to hockey game last night. It's game three of the Everblades. They're in the Kelly Cup finals. I think I
Mhm.
ran into four people that were at the meeting last night.
Oh, did you really? That's
Yeah,
pretty cool. Yeah, yeah. One more game, they win the whole thing, right?
yeah,
They won
yeah.
last night.
Friday
Yeah.
night, I'll definitely be there. That's kind of a rarity to watch your local team, skate their cup.
Oh, yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool.
So, what are rent rates doing?
So again, that was the big bulk of the meeting, that discussion. In breaking our market down by rent rates, like the segments of them, like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500. Those are kind of the rates we went over. And the short of it is we're seeing a little bit of downward pressure in rent rates in the 2,500 range to 2,000, 100, $200. It's going down a little bit. I think it kind of peaked. They really pushed the rents as high as it could, and it's getting to a point where affordability and a lot of people aren't able to afford a $2,500
Well, you
rent.
also have a lot of the people that came here for the storm are heading home.
Right. Absolutely. And things are kind of slowing down a little bit, meaning, I mean, people are still busy. If you're willing to work, you are busy. I think the problem is finding enough people that are willing to work. But that's been an issue in itself. But higher rents, again, 2,500, they're more like 2,300 now. The $1,000, which are, there's very few in that price range. 1,000 to 1,500, those are stable, steady. If anything, slightly going up still, because there's not many in that price range. But the 25 to 2,000s where you're seeing some of the downward pressure. I just think we're kind of getting a little normal. I don't think we're going to have some huge downturn in rent rates by any means, but the higher end is being affected somewhat. And I say higher end. The higher end is a brand new house with no pool, no canal, no waterfront, but it's new, it's nice, newer and nice, and that's where we're seeing a little bit of a drop. I'd say, I think we talked about in the meeting, about 6 to 8% drop on the high end. Otherwise, everything else is pretty stable, which is good. I mean, that's kind of reality in a lot of ways. It's not good for the investor that wants, we want to keep it going higher and higher, but it also, there's affordability and it's just coming back a little bit. We can push them as high as we could, I think. So for now, we're going to stabilize and kind of keep going forward. So.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. You've got a lot of multifamily going vertical in
Yeah.
Southwest Florida right now,
Yeah.
and honestly think we need the inventory. It's not even that they're overbuilding. I think we need the inventory. God help you if you put a property in the MLS for rent. It's about 70 calls and or inquiries by the internet, and probably 10% of them qualify for the most part.
And in some cases, not even 10%. Yeah, there's a lot of inquiries, and you go through a lot of unqualified candidates to get a good one. So
So let's talk about another weird thing you ran into that I had never heard of till we spoke about it when we were having breakfast. The security deposit versus landlord reimbursement insurance policies. I never even heard of that until
I,
this.
I had neither. So really, again, I don't know how well I'm going to describe it. I'm not overly familiar with it, but basically, what some management companies are doing. Again, I'm not want to knock my competition, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to kind of educate what's happening in the market, something I would steer clear of. Um, they're offering an insurance policy, in essence, for the tenant to pay for instead of a security deposit. And so it's like a $700 policy, and the tenant is not. Let's say the day the tenant moves out, they don't get to earn that money back. And it's not $700. Let's say it's $700 in the actual overall policy payouts, $3,500, and that's pretty correct numbers on what I've seen in these policies. The landlord has the right to get the $3,500. The tenant has no right to it. They're just paying for the insurance policy, and it's less money out of pocket from the tenant initially to move them in, and they have no incentive to get it back. The whole thing's a mess.
Yeah, they have
And
no skin in the game whatsoever.
yeah, again, it's like those loans that were no money down loans that everyone could easily get, and then the time came to pay them, and they could pay them, and that created problems for us in the past. And that's kind of what this is. I saw it on multiple. The weird thing too with the property, there was a company that was doing it, and we got a lot of the management from that company, and they listed themselves, the management company, instead of the actual landlord or owner.
Is this a national entity doing this?
No. Well, once local, now more national. If that makes any sense. They were bought out. But the local company was the one that was doing it, and I was just kind of shocked at like this is I've had to deal with trying to get the money after someone leaves and causes damage, and it's been a nightmare. And we have yet to see a dime for getting to.
I mean, that's a great for insurance agents, and that's great for contractors.
Yep, 100%. That's all it is good for. Yeah, there's not good for the landlord.
Well, usually there's some sort of if I know we're not supposed to bash our competition, but if licensees are pushing a new cool thing, that usually means they're getting a big.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And again, someone who hasn't done the business for a long time could look at it as, hey, less money out of pocket for the tenant. They can afford the rent. It's less money when they're moving in. But I look at it completely opposite. I want more money down if possible. I would say if you go back in time and look at loans where if you put no money down versus 20% down, a lot more of the no money down loans defaulted. The 20% ones, when you put 20% down, you've got skin in the game and you can afford it. So it just horrible concept in my opinion. I want a security deposit that that's more than the monthly rent that I can use in the event that someone moves out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about how are rent rates fluctuating from Cape Coral to Lehigh? Because my joke is all Cape Coral is generally Lehigh with a moat, which will truly offend the people that live, breathe, and just love Cape Coral. But I mean, Cape Coral now has a lot more things to do and places to eat and shop than Lehigh. But Lehigh's coming a long way with that too. Sure. But how are the rents rate different there right now?
So for a while, it was getting extremely close, maybe within $50 to $100 if you were to pick up this exact same house from Cape Coral and take it into Lehigh, Cape Coral being slightly higher. I feel like that gap's getting a little bit bigger between the price range. So you're looking at maybe $150 to $200 difference in some cases for the same house from Lehigh to Cape Coral. So there's been that gap has opened up a little bigger, but generally speaking, the prices are pretty similar. If you take both markets, again, there was a time where it used to be $300 or $400 or $500 difference in rent rates. It's been a while, but that was a time in the past. But now, very similar, very, very, very close, off by let's say $100 on average, maybe $150 for the same exact house.
What, $250 back in the day?
Yeah, it used to be a lot more. So I mean, it's gotten closer, but you're still going to pay more, or at least collect more in Cape Coral, but the initial acquisition cost for a property in Cape Coral is higher too. So you'll
that it's unincorporated Lee County, so your tax bill is lighter. Yeah. Your tenants insurance, or not insurance, your tenants utility bill is a little lighter. The Cape has a higher excise tax than the county.
Correct.
And then if they're on city water, the Cape city water is very expensive as well too. So it's actually why me personally, I'm bullish on anything unincorporated Lee County.
Yeah.
The stuff in the city scares me a little bit because it's just an additional layer of government that we have to write a check to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, and dealing with them is not the easiest either. It kind of depends on who you get there when you're dealing with them. But yeah, no thanks on that part of it. But yeah, I get that question a lot.
How about for Port Charlotte and Northport? How is that in relation to Cape Coral?
Similar. Northport getting a slightly higher rate, really not by much. I mean, we're talking $100, $50 maybe. I mean, you take the same house in Port Charlotte and in Northport. Again, Port Charlotte, Northport, if you're driving through it, you don't know when Northport and Port Charlotte ends and stops. I mean, it's like the same city. So just the closer you get in Northport and closer to Sarasota, you might get a little bit higher rent rate, but really not. I mean, we're $50.
Northport's really just a bedroom community of Sarasota, and Sarasota demographically is Naples. Very well.
Agreed.
So a lot of money floating around that little ecosystem. You're just going to have a higher rent.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. And a lot of people in Northport work in Sarasota. But I get the question constantly, well, which area gets more rent? We're talking $50, maybe $100 max, if there's a difference at all. So it's a very similar market.
The irony is like Port Charlotte's really coming to its own.
Yeah.
There's a ton of, I used to say, if you want to do nothing, move to Charlotte County because there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
that's not true anymore. There's everything you want has popped up in Charlotte County, and the water quality issues don't affect them as much.
Correct. And there's more to come. There's a lot of building going on, right, over the bridge. There's that huge development going in. I mean, there's a lot of good things in the future that's coming there. So
yeah,
there's a lot of good things to say about Charlotte
and
County.
taxes are lower.
Yeah, the taxes are lower. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the rental market has peaks and valleys, just like the resale market does. You got I always use it. We're inverse of the country. So like most places, when it's warm, they're busy, and when it's cold, cold, I guess for them, they're slower. To where us, when it's cooler, we're busier, and when it's warmer, we're slower. The heat of the summer, July, August, September is when you really want to pin your ears back and buy something. That's usually the lowest pricing you're going to have of the year. Now, what is that in relation to the rental market?
Similar in a lot of ways. I'll just mention this. Our peak months are definitely January through April, are like some of the hottest months of the year when it comes to rent rates being the highest. A lot of people from up north being down here. People are busy working. I mean, there's a lot going on. Those are really peak months. May is good, but towards the end of May, probably halfway through May, every year, and this is the every year cycle that I see. At the end of the school year, a lot of people are getting out of school. There's graduations, there's all that kind of stuff going on. So people kind of slow down and focus on that. So last part of May, first half or so of June, a little bit slower, picks up a little bit during the summer because between school years and stuff for families, that's when they're moving a lot of times. And then when school starts again in August, slows down a little bit, picks up again September, October, pretty busy. And then November, December teeters off a little bit because you've got a lot of people focused on, holidays and that time of the year. And then again, that same cycle of January, it cranks again. So, but that's been the case for 20 plus years of doing this. I mean, that's always been the case for those reasons. So I don't see that ever changing. I think there's times where people will be concerned about a property staying in the market longer than normal during, let's say, end of May, June. And then they kind of, get nervous when in the rental market is very solid, in my opinion, but that's a little bit slower time, less people looking. So keep your, don't give up hope and lower your standards. I mean, that's the norm, man. It happens every year.
And that was going to be the next question. What is the one thing not to do when the market starts? Because everything's a pendulum. The pendulum's been on the landlord side for so long. At some point, it's going to swing towards the tenant side. Oh, yeah. You remember the days in Lehigh when we were renting 3 2s with a 1-car garage for $595 and putting a brand new washer and dryer in to get tenants.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. When there's 4 rentals on the same street. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, I remember. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that a problem that I see, or a lot of people will do, is they'll get desperate and they'll want to get someone in so bad that they'll lower their standards on someone they probably wouldn't normally rent to. So yeah, never lower what your qualifications are for a tenant. You have an asset, a couple $100,000 plus asset that you're going to put someone into. They need to qualify on every level. And again, don't lower your expectations, your standards at all, ever. Regardless of the market. You might lower your rent rate if it, to get someone in, but you're not going to change what they have to do to qualify to get into it. So.
Yeah, amen to that. I always laugh because it's become quite fashionable to demagogue landlords.
Yeah.
And Twitter's a wonderful place if you try and defend housing or landlords or real estate investment on Twitter, you get attacked by a whole bunch of really friendly, nice people that, have so many wonderful things to tell you about the world. And I just don't think they understand that you, like here, and say you got a Cape Coral 3-2. I'm about to give you quiet enjoyment of a $350,000 asset for $2,200 a month. Okay. And you're only going to give me $3,000 out of your pocket for that quiet enjoyment of that asset. Yep. And you have rights. I have duties. The state of Florida, I have duties. I have things I'm supposed to do. Now, like slumlords who don't fix stuff and play games, they should suffer. Yeah. But it's the demagoguery of landlords. I would love to stick a lot of these people on the other side of the table and see how see how it changes their view. Like when I first started buying rental property, I had so much humanity.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times that I would return with no rent money, but they were grilling T-bones,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Corona in hand and a T-bone on the grill telling me you ain't got the rent maybe next week, and
Oh, yeah.
as at some point it's a business and you're in the business of providing this housing and you need to provide a quality, asset because
Yeah.
quality assets attract quality tenants. But it's the demagoguery of landlords is very interesting, and it's really it's just identity politics driven for the most part.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
it'll go ahead.
with that, I mean, it's as if they're owed something because they live there. I don't know how to word it without sounding horrible, but it's a business. You buy investment property for a required or a desired return on your investment. You want to make money. As wonderful as charities are, and they are, this is not a charity. We buy investment property with the return. So the emotional aspect that some people put into investment property is typically when they make mistakes. And again, I don't want to sound harsh. Yesterday at the meeting, someone mentioned a situation where someone was dealing with having cancer. I was just like, could you have picked a more difficult, circumstance for someone's family to deal with? And at that point, what do you do? That's kind of a loaded question. But I mean, you want to be humane. But if you look at this just from a business aspect, you're renting this property. This is the terms of the lease. You meet your obligations. I meet mine, and that's it. It's the best way to approach it. Although there's times where that's difficult.
It really depends on the person and their conduct too. I mean,
yeah.
I've had tenants that their grandma died 4 times, is why they had to go out of town, and that's why they were always late on their rent because grandma, this was 3rd or 4th time she died suddenly, always suddenly.
Well, this is horrible to say. This is horrible. You do it long enough and you get like thinking, how many grandparents do you have? Like, how many, how many relatives have died in your family the last month? Like, and again, in reality, if that really has happened, that's horrible. But there's been times where it's not true. They're just using it as an excuse to not pay their rent. But they said you've got the gorgeous car and they dress to the nine, and it's like, meet your obligations and then we'll talk. And I think a lot of times too, to chime in a little about management companies, a lot of owners, when I take over a portfolio that an owner previously had managed and knew the tenants and picked up the rents and interacted with people, that personal aspect of it would have a lot to do with the decisions they make, which would then get them in a bad spot and then want them to not deal with it anymore and hire a management company. But then the management company, like myself, gets involved. And I always say, are you willing to release control over your assets, other than obviously the rent rates and expenses, obviously, but like not allow tenants to go around my company's back, contact you and make special requests, and then you say yes to it. For this to work, you've got a no emotion. You let us handle it, and we'll be the big bad property management company to say no to that and yes to this, and the rents go to this price. But a lot of landlords make the mistake of allowing the human side, which it's good to be human and be a good person, but be a good person, in your own life and in what time you want to devote to. But from a business standpoint, you buy investment property to make money. That is the number one reason why people do it. I mean, that's why we do it. So you got to get rid of the emotional part of it. And again, every excuse in the book, I say I've heard every excuse. I think I have. And then I hear stuff. I'm like, wow, I never heard that one. That was pretty creative. That was pretty good. So
let's talk about new construction versus existing homes. Is there much of a difference?
There's really not. Rent rate wise, very similar. If it's a nice home, an old 10-year-old home, but it's been, it's cleaned, it's been fresh paint, it looks good, you're really not seeing much of a price difference. I guess just for a moment, I'll speak about acquiring one. So if you're going to buy a home for $300,000 that's 15 years old, or you're going to spend $20,000 or $30,000 more to buy a brand new home with warranties and everything's brand new, pretty easy decision to make, in my opinion. You're looking at the same rent rate and with warranties and not knowing what happened in the last 15 years to that house. So I would say not much difference in rent rates. I'd buy new if I'm going to buy an asset like that. I wouldn't.
Particularly the roof is the cost spread right now. If you got the roof on, that's the cost spread between that 05, 06 build house and the brand new one today. And
Yep,
the codes,
exactly.
in my opinion, are better.
Yep.
The
I
new
mean,
homes came through the storm great.
it is phenomenal. Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. The codes that the city has here locally, the counties have here locally, they work because we saw that after the storm, after the big Hurricane Ian. So yeah, I'd go new because you're not going to get much difference in rent. I mean, you're not going to get much less. If you were to go with a used home, but there's a lot of the unknowns: roof, AC, septic system if it has it, hot water heater, some of the bigger expenses. If it's brand new, it's under warranty, you don't have to worry about it. So pay a little bit extra to get it. Yeah.
So let's talk about the in the month-to-month versus annual leases. Is that something that you should keep an eye on as the market changes?
What I would briefly discuss on that is on a month-to-month lease, I would use that. I don't use it from the beginning. If a person applies for a property and qualifies, we put a 1-year lease. That's the norm. And we would find less people interested in a property if we only offered it month to month. People want some kind of stability. But let's say throughout that first year, you've got 2 or 3 or 4 late payments, maybe a problematic tenant who complains about everything, but really nothing, no big issues. They're just being a problem. What we'll do, and we've done several times, is reach out to them, 60 to 90 days prior to their lease being due. We'll discuss the rent rates with the owner, with the investor, and then say, all right, we're going month to month. And if you're for the next 6 months, whatever number we're going to put on it, so the next 6 months, you pay on time, there's no issues, we'll discuss doing a full year or, get you on a solid lease. But you're going month to month because you have not been, let's say, flawless in the last year, you've been kind of a problem. And that conversation usually, scares people into doing it the right way and making it a priority. And then you have control. The other thing is you have control. So let's say on a month-to-month lease, someone doesn't pay and you're just done with dealing with it. Instead of going through the whole eviction process and disputing rents due and going back and forth, you put a notice of non-renewal and you non-renew them. And if they don't leave at the end of that date, whatever date it is, a month out, you have to evict them. But the eviction process is you didn't leave when I told you to. You're a holdover tenant and get out. There is no argument. There is no drawn out court issue.
Florida's pretty simple. On as long as you're going for a 1-count eviction, you're not going for the 2-count where you're asking for the judgment. And I made that mistake on my first eviction on one of my properties. I filed a 2-count eviction because I was mad and I wanted a judgment. And I was going to get a judgment against somebody that never paid a bill in their life. But you make decisions like that because you're frustrated. And the 2-count eviction, they have a right to request a hearing without putting any money in the court in Lee County, to where on a 1-count eviction, basically it's, do you have the money?
Although occasionally what you still see, for whatever reason, the judges will give hearings when no money's been paid to the court. Again, that we can go down a rabbit hole on that one, but I don't know why. But there's been times where I've gone to court hearings, and it's rare, but it happens. And I'm like, they haven't paid any money. Like, why are we here? There's no. And again, we always end up winning.
Judges appreciate when you let them know they're wrong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They love that. Yeah, that's a really good conversation. Yeah, they appreciate that. Yeah,
they handle it well.
They handle it really well. Like, why are they here? They haven't paid your rent. And of course, I will say this though, in the defense of some of the judges I've dealt with throughout the years, really never had a bad experience. They're really just kind of down to earth and, hey, have you paid? No. Are you going to pay? Well, I'm trying to, but you haven't, right? No. Okay, finalize the eviction. I mean, they've been good to work with. It's just when they give the opportunity for a tenant who hasn't paid a stage to come in and talk, it's like, what's there to talk about? You haven't paid. We're requesting payment. What are we here for? But again, I've been pleasantly surprised by the outcomes throughout the years.
Let's talk about like cash on cash return on investment in today's market. Kind of what are you just seeing out there without turning this into a book report?
So if you are buying a property cash right now, you're probably looking at 3.5%, 4.5% on your money in reality, based upon the acquisition cost, insurance costs, real estate taxes, and expenses. I mean that's if you're paying cash for it. So on the finance side, if you're buying a property financed, in our market in South Florida, just being honest, unless you're putting a significant amount down and you're getting a real good rate, so maybe the builder's offering a really good incentive to get you something in the 4s, which is pretty unheard of, but there are builders that are working their magic to make that happen, so it still makes sense for the investor.
I'm hearing 5 and 6 points are the buy downs to get that rate.
Yeah, but again, unless that's tied into the loan somehow, and the builders want to pay for it. I mean, I don't know the details of some of the what they're offering. Unless you get that, it's a negative return. So you just gotta be careful on what you buy, just because the rates have gone up so high, to where if you're mortgaging a property, you're probably not seeing real high returns. I've heard.
That's from my experience. That person tends that purchaser tends to be, I'm going to retire here, but let me get it now so I know where I'm going. This house is for sale because my sister's around the corner, and we'll put a tenant in it for 3 years until my wife can retire from the school board. I've seen a lot of those. That's kind of how a lot of they start out as a landlord, then they become a snowbird, and then they become a full-time resident when we're trying to go to work in the right-hand lane doing 30.
And when personal circumstances has a lot to, yeah, exactly. That's so true. Personal circumstances has a lot to do with the decision a lot of people are making on why they're buying it. If your game plan 10 years from now is to live in Florida, and in the meantime, have someone offset your expenses or have a small return, awesome idea. And just for our market, if you take our house, what houses here, pick them up and throw them in California or New York or some of these other states, it's a third of what the cost would be if the same house in these properties. So to be 20 minutes from beautiful, beaches and water, and have a property where it's covering your costs in the meantime, still not a bad gig. But from the return standpoint,
drop any of these houses in the DC area and it's twice as much, and they don't have redfish or snook.
No, they don't, or tarpon or sharks.
No, there's no reason to live there.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of sharks.
Yeah, there's a lot of sharks in DC. No, there's no the appeal that's not going to go away is in February. You and I are on a boat fishing in shorts, and they're up north shoveling snow. That to own Florida property.
No state income tax. Florida's a pretty business friendly state.
Yep.
The homestead laws are great. As far as protecting, it's why so many of the wealthy come here and homestead a huge house, because it's probably one of the greatest forms of, other than like a Cook Island trust, it's one of the greatest forms of asset protection in the world.
Yeah,
is a Florida homesteaded residence. And they set that up for a reason. So that's to attract capital.
Yep. And it's worked. Again, I have nothing but I love our state and what it offers, and awesome state to invest in. Just the returns right now anyway are lower than what they were a year ago. So.
Now, how about expenses? How do you maintain realistic expenses? Because that is the real modality that most new landlords and investors just told you've never done it, so you don't know.
Yeah. So again, brand new construction expenses aren't really a problem or an issue, because you've got warranties and everything's brand new. But you definitely need to get a game plan for the bigger items that we kind of just mentioned: roof, AC, water heater, septic system if you have it, well equipment if you have it, and so those are your bigger expenses, and that needs to be checked in great detail when you buy the property. And if there's an issue with it, ask for a discount or ask for it to be fixed, and then plan accordingly. But a lot of the investors I found, at least newer investors, don't have a reserve or a game plan for those larger items.
Well, you look at like the Green brothers, when they put their portfolio together in the market crash, they would not buy a property unless it was on water and sewer.
Right.
It was brilliant, because at that time we're like, wow, you're paying $5,000 more than you could have. And instead of paying a $42,000 house, you were getting a $47,000 house.
Yeah.
But they limited their downside. The water and sewer is such a huge downside limiter. And then on top of that, it's less brain damage. It's pretty rare that city water goes out.
Oh gosh, extremely rare.
The ants on the contactor for the well equipment is often.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. If you have well equipment or a septic system, you will put money in them at some point. It's inevitable. There's no way to escape, to get past that without something happening. But yeah, anytime you can invest in city water and city sewer, I'd pay. You're going to pay more, but long term, I think it's, again, I'm not saying don't buy with a well or septic. I own property with those items, and there's no, you just tally that in as part of your expenses. But if you can purchase with city water and city sewer, it offsets to large expenses that you'll have throughout the years. They're just gone. So initially paying for it up front saves you a lot of brain damage in the future. So just plan accordingly, have reserves, because you're gonna need it at some point.
So if somebody has any questions, how would they get in touch with you, Mike?
Hey, I'll give you my cell. I mean, that's probably the best way. And I'll mention this. A lot of companies, or a lot of complaints I hear from investors is with their current either management company or who they're working with, they can't get a hold of them. So here's my cell. It's
there's a national company that you've picked up a lot of properties from, that it's like everybody that I've talked to that had to manage a property, it was like having Comcast manage your property.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. Oh, you couldn't get a hold of anybody for days. Yeah. I mean, I give my personal cell out to everybody that does business with me. If they need to get a hold of me, I'm readily available. But my cell is 239-560-6164. And we'll put that somewhere in this, on the video so people can have it. But happy to text or call me at any point, and I'll get back to you and help any way I can.
Awesome. Good talking to you, Mike.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.